Okay guys, I'm gonna give you a couple tips on connecting the chest tube. So this is not the perfect mannequin, but we did what we could. So just imagine that this chest tube has been inserted at the appropriate location. In the hospital setting, you're gonna connect this to an atrium. Now I realize in the pre-hospital setting, you may just connect it to a Heimlich valve, but you may also be doing like an interfacility transfer where these are connected. In any case, when I put the chest tube in, after I put the chest tube in, I secure it, and then you're gonna connect it to this atrium. Now notice that this tube right here is beveled, and that is important because you plug this in right here, and then kind of the common technique is to take a strip of tape and secure it by going here and kind of rolling it around here. And I'm not saying that's trash, but I think that we can do better than that. And one reason is that if you look at the width of the tape, where you're connecting right here, if you're not sleep deprived and it's not hitting the fan and everything's going perfectly, you're going to split the difference where this connection is. You may be a little bit off to the side. Now look how much this is beveled, so you're not going to get any purchase on this chest tube right here on this aspect. You will over here. So anyway, what I prefer to do is I've torn these off before the presentation, so I'm not fumbling with the tape. But I'll tear up a long strip like this, and I'll go down the length of the tube like that. Because if the tube, it's gonna be pulled in this direction. So now you have all this purchase of this adhesive on both sides. And so, I prefer to do two, and it doesn't have to be perfectly evenly spaced out. But in my mind, this is gonna give us a lot more purchase here on both sides. And I typically do go ahead and finish just because this is kind of the standard with one right here, and that's also gonna anchor down those strips that we put down. But I feel like now this is in pretty good, and it's unlikely that this is gonna come disconnected. And then of course our tape here is fresh and it's dry. We're not dealing with old tape and blood and all that other kind of stuff, which is the reason why I like doing just a little bit more with these long strips. Now the other thing is that it's typically conventional to kind of tack this down to the patient. Now you put the chest tube in, you've sutured it in. If you're in the field, you've put a chest seal on it. If you're in the hospital, you might use a little petroleum gauze where the tube inserts. Again, not the best mannequin. I tucked it up in there. But then you would dress it with 4x4s and all this foam tape. And then what is pretty common is down here, it's kind of tack it down to the patient so it's not flopping around out here. So for the sake of this little demonstration, we're going to pretend that this blue surface is the patient's abdomen. So typically what people will do is they will kind of bring this over, and it so happens right now I'm around the juncture of these, but it doesn't really matter if your chest tube was much deeper. But it'll get tacked down to the patient kind of like that. And again, I'm not saying that's garbage, but I think we can do better than that. If hypothetically you had a force that pulled on both sides of these away from the patient perpendicular, yeah, this might provide some good retention. But if the chest tube is going to get pulled out, it's going to get pulled out from downstream. And it's going to happen when the patient's being transferred from the stretcher to the CT table, or in a pre-hospital setting, on the helicopter, off the helicopter, from the EMS stretcher to the hospital stretcher. And it's going to happen because this is going to get caught in here, or maybe with all the excitement, someone just forgets to pick that up and put it on the patient's legs. So now this is anchored down here, and this patient is getting moved all the way over here. But point being, it's going to get pulled from this direction. So what I prefer to do is take this roll of tape, and I'll pull a little bit of slack in this direction to create a little slack here. And normally in the Army, everything we like tight, and we tape up our straps so we don't have anything flapping around. We like a nice neat package. In this case, just a little bit of extra slack, and that's because, again, this blue surface is the patient's abdomen. What I'm going to do is tape to the patient's abdomen. I'm going to raise the tube up a little bit. Let me do it like this so you can see. Tape to the patient's abdomen. Raise the tube up just a little bit like that. I'm going to go back under, and I'm going to tape it to itself now. And now I'm going to tape it again to the patient. So when you just had that strip laying over the tube, if you looked at the circumference of the tube, you might have adhesion between the tape laying over that tube, might be like 30% of the circumference of the tube, which again, if some hypothetical force is pulling it this way, might help, but if it's being pulled in that direction, it's just a shearing force and there's minimal adhesion there. But now we have encased the entire tube in tape and connected the tape to itself and anchored it to the patient. So now if it's pulled hard in this direction, it's going to pull very hard at this anchor. And remember, you have a little bit of slack up here, so that's no problem. This is not going to be affected, but you have this very strong anchor here. So if this thing gets jerked as you're transferring the patient, again, you have this nice tether and this nice anchor instead of just one piece that's kind of just laying on top. So that's how I do it.